All right, welcome to another episode of the Footwear Intern podcast. Today we've got Tyler here as our guest. Super excited to have you, Tyler. Um, if this is your first time listening to the Footwear Intern podcast, this is a podcast dedicated to sharing stories of footwear professionals, their route into their job and experience throughout, to hopefully shed a light on opportunities in the footwear industry and different paths that people have taken to get there. So, Tyler, super excited to have you joining the podcast.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
glad to be here.
I'd love to, if you could just share an intro briefly on yourself, a little about KNS and what you do there. That'd be awesome.
Sure. My name is Tyler Larsen, and I'm over the men's product at a company called KNS International, which is a kind of a footwear-based company that owns a number of brands. The men's brands that we deal with here, we have a brand called Taft and a brand called Vance. I've been here 12 years, kind of been through a number of different roles here at the company, all related to our footwear. I'm just kind of excited to share a little bit of wisdom that I have and maybe pointers for people that are interested in the footwear industry.
That's awesome. Um, I am, yeah, super excited to. We talked a little while back, but prior I had heard of Taft, but I hadn't heard of Vance,
Mm-hmm.
and then Journey as well is another
Yep.
company that you guys own,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so super cool. I guess Tyler, just let's hear a little bit about your background before getting into KNS. Maybe like a history of Tyler
Sure,
that got
sure.
you to this point.
Yeah. Um, so my pre-KNS life, I worked for Overstock.com fresh out of college, back before it was Beyond. Um, so I went to school. I didn't really know exactly what I was interested in doing. I kind of dabbled in the finance world a little bit, realized it wasn't for me, and ended up with a business management degree just to get out of school. And at the time, Overstock was a pretty big player in the online retail world. And fresh out of school, the corporate office was not too far away from where I lived. And I applied for a job as a merchandise operations analyst and got it. So it was kind of my first gig out of college. So I know that a lot of other guests you've had on your podcast have had a little bit more of a direct interest in footwear and footwear design, and that was definitely not me or my intention coming out of school. So I kind of stumbled in the industry kind of by chance a little bit. Um, the kind of the outline or the overview of my career really follows along the path of KNS International, the company I work for. So if it's okay, I'll just give like a really brief
Totally.
kind of explanation as to what the company was and how I ended up here and what I'm doing now. So when I worked for Overstock, Overstock.com was really big into a lot of different categories, a lot of housewares. They had clothing and footwear and things like that. And as an account manager for Overstock, I managed a bunch of online dropship accounts. And KNS International was one of those accounts that I managed.
Mm.
And through that relationship, I ended up meeting the owner of KNS International. Um, and it was really kind of a weird situation because it turns out I had been working with him just kind of digitally through email and stuff for years. And when I met him in person, I realized I've been playing basketball with him for about 5 years.
No, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
so it was really, I just, you play pickup ball with a bunch of guys and you don't really know what they do or, who exactly they are. So it was just kind of a random occurrence.
That's funny.
Yeah. But through that relationship, I got a job at KNS International as an account manager. And at the time, our company, KNS, was kind of at the forefront of the drop ship business. The company's been around about 25 years now. and the owner and founder at the time was, kind of innovative in the way he was looking to build a business for himself. And K&S was really just looking to buy any types of products they thought they could repackage and ship as a drop shipper. And they were one of Overstock's biggest dropship customers, and of course worked with a lot of other national retailers. So shortly after I got hired there, it was about 2010. One of the things we started dabbling in, it was some clothing and footwear and some jewelry and accessories and things like that. And we had some footwear that took off. It was product that we were buying, kind of private label and relabeling items that we were buying here domestically. So not really intending to build a brand or anything like that. But it turned out there was a niche for kind of entry level footwear that, we were able to fill. And as we grew as a company, all the other things we were dabbling in, the jewelry and clothing and housewares and lighting and bedding and all this other random stuff kind of fell to the side, and we really focused on footwear. And about 2014 is when we kind of took that dive and said, okay, we're a footwear company. At that time, we had a women's brand called Journey, which is still here today. It's kind of an entry price point brand. And then we had Vance at the time, which was established a few years after Journey. And I was here when we initially established that brand. So when I was hired here, it was, definitely smaller company vibes. And I was an account manager at the time. And after a few years, I transitioned into a role as a buyer. So I was buying, footwear, but also buying clothing and other random stuff that we were selling. And when the company kind of made the decision to really focus on footwear and start developing these brands, I was given the opportunity to kind of step in and really start that process and kind of lay the foundation for what Vance would be at the time. And similar to our women's line, Vance was established as like an entry price point, men's dress and dress casual footwear brand, playing in the synthetic area. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. No real formal training in footwear. No one really here at K&S really had any formal footwear training. So we just kind of went at it and, very bootstrapped and, tried to figure it out the best we could.
That's cool. And so, how long then have you been in this position? Was that you said 2014?
Yeah, so about 2014. Yeah, so 2014 is when we started, kind of in that footwear category, and then 2017 was the first year that we just kind of buckled down and said, all right, let's figure out how to build something in this category, and build something that would, kind of last and not just kind of in the past, I'd say we kind of a little more of we were looking for opportunity buys and things like that we could flip essentially. And, this is in 2017 is when we really decided to shift our focus and start developing our own brands.
Okay, that's really cool. I guess I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
A couple in the noggin, a couple written down. But as you shifted from private label to developing some of your own stuff, it's I guess first, what does your team look like? At least when you started to now, in product development, is it?
So originally we were very scrappy, very very thin. I know you've spoken with other people on your podcast, and you've kind of discussed the differences between working at a large kind of national company versus smaller. And we were very small, very very tight. So at the beginning parts of my career in footwear, I was doing literally everything for our business.
Wow.
It was product research, designing, sourcing, all the account management pieces, really everything from A to Z. It was like, hey, I'll take care of the men's shoes. We had a little bit bigger team for our women's side because they had started earlier. But initially it was just me. And as we've grown, we've kind of created organizations within our company that focus on brands now. So we have a brand president. We have a VP of sourcing now who runs an office in China. We have designers that we hire. We have me that kind of does the overall line planning. We have a merchandising team. So it's really, for me personally, it's been really interesting because I've got to experience kind of the grassroots startup vibe into transitioning into more of a player in the footwear category.
Wow, that's so cool.
Even in the last few years, it's been a drastic change in the company organization and the people we have working here now.
Yeah. So when you were starting off and you were doing, I mean, literally every role was it like traveling to factories and working closely with them, or like working on designs and sourcing the samples and just kind of like evaluating and moving forward from there? Like what did kind of like the early grassroots design process look like?
Yeah, so it was kind of all over the place, honestly. We really didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
That was probably on us for not searching for some experts at the time that could help us.
It's cool though. I think it's a cool story.
It is good and bad.
Yeah.
I personally loved being involved in kind of trying to figure things out. So that's kind of my nature is I like to kind of dive in and get into the thick of things. I know that if I would have started at a company doing something very, cut and dry, kind of in a silo doing this one exact task, I think I get bored with that pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So
me too.
it was good for me. So we kind of approached things in a few different ways. We had met some sourcing agents who were based here in the U.S. who had some factory relationships in China. So we did do a large part of our business through some sourcing agents. We found pretty quickly that there was limits to what they would do for us, and of course there's a lot of other kind of baggage that goes on with working through agents.
Yeah.
So part of what I did was started the process to find our own factories. So we kind of had a two-pronged approach where we grew our business using sourcing agents, but also looking for the right factory partners that we could kind of work with directly. And ultimately, you're always going to get the best results by working directly with the factory. So we knew we wanted to get there. And the big change for us was as we grew, we were finally able to open our own sourcing office in China, and really get hands-on with the factories on a daily basis and make sure everything is in line with what we're expecting.
Yeah. When I guess this is my last like beginning question, but when you were like I at least for me on like some of my first jobs where I was sourcing product that I had designed as well, and even still getting samples is like a mini like Christmas
It's like
experience,
Christmas
right?
for sure.
But when it was like your very first ones and you had gone from drop shipping to developing it yourself, what was like the feeling of accomplishment, or what?
Um,
I guess was it, and for you from going from drop shipping to developing your own stuff, was there a change there, or what?
yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of mixed, right? Like, I think um, I think it depends on the type of person you are. For me personally, I feel like anytime I see something that I've made, I have a hard time not kind of nitpicking at what I've done.
Totally.
So there's kind of a mixed reaction between, hey, I feel really good and accomplished that we've created this product. It's taken a lot of work, but we've kind of figured it out. So there's like that part of the brain that's saying, this is awesome. I got to do this myself. What a cool job. And then there's the other part where it's like, oh man, I wish I would have done this differently, or I really wish I had a factory that could do this or this. So it was very kind of for me, it was mixed, with like really, really enjoying what I was doing, but also knowing that like, hey, this isn't good enough. We need to keep searching for either a different factory or doing, having different methods in which we design and hand over our spec sheets and tech packets and things over to the factories. Like, how do we make this better?
Yeah.
So like it was very accomplished, or a sense of accomplishment, but also kind of eye opening every season. It's just like, okay, well, what's next? How do we make this better?
Totally. And it sounds like continuing to grow. Was there a point where it felt like you hit full stride, like the factory partners were correct? Was that like when you were opening your sourcing team there? Like what's when you felt like at least for me, like working with startups is always like maybe first couple rounds are a question, and you finally hit stride, and things feel great and you feel like you can design or develop anything. But was
You
there that like stride hitting point? I don't know.
I, you know, man, COVID has just, I feel like COVID has destroyed any sense of stride or getting things, on the right track.
Right.
I think every business is like that a little bit, but it's kind of two steps forward, one step back type of thing. Um, but to answer your question, I think is what you're getting at. For me personally, we kind of dabbled in that entry price point piece for a number of years, and it was mixed results, mostly good, some bad. For me, like the kind of that first eye-opening experience or kind of accomplishment was, and we had one kind of unique situation where we had come in contact with the men's buying team from Nordstrom, and we actually, this was back in 2017, and we actually launched a private label for Nordstrom called Thomas and Vine. So it was something we met with them, we talked about the idea, they liked what we had to offer. So it was kind of, for me personally, it was kind of a career milestone to say, okay, this isn't really a job for me anymore. It's like, we can do this. We've had some success. We've got some big industry retailers that are interested in what we're doing here. So that was the very first um, kind of step into saying, all right, we've got something here really meaningful. How do we grow this, and how do we, transition into something even bigger than that?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the very first eye-opening experience for me to say this is something we need to stick with.
Totally. Huh. That's cool. That are you good? Is there still a relationship there with Nordstrom, or was that?
So
Uh,
we work with them still, but that brand we discontinued about 2 years ago.
okay.
For us, it got to a point that we were exclusive with Nordstrom for a few years. Realized that to grow where we wanted to grow, we had to get into different retailers, and we had grown to a point that I was pretty happy. But it was around 2018 we acquired the Taft. I'm sorry, 2022 we acquired the Taft brand,
Hmm.
and they didn't really compete with each other, but it just made more sense for us to focus on Taft, which is kind of very, a lot higher end premium footwear. And then we had the Vance brand that was kind of entry price point. And, our time and resources were better spent on those two brands as they were more established. And we were able to kind of sunset the Thomas and Vine brand and move on from that.
Okay. Cool. I guess getting to where you're at, and starting off like studying for a business management degree, working at Overstock, then drop shipping at KNS. I guess I'm going through your history a little bit, but getting into like the product development design space was there any like good resource for like education as a professional? Is that
Yeah. So we, honestly, that's kind of the piece of my career I wish I had started a little earlier in trying to develop a better understanding of kind of industry standards. Our our owner was, very, very trusting, and really relied on us to kind of figure out the best way to make things happen. And I wished years and years ago that I had found, either a mentor or someone that was in the industry that could help guide us a little better. I do like the challenge of trying to learn things on my own, but
Totally.
that's one thing I think we lacked. Even 5 years ago, just a better direction into whether it's programs or software or things that could help us with the design process, with a PLM system that helps us keep things organized, or a PIM system. So those are the things that I wish we had done earlier. We're at a point now that I feel really good with what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I definitely think that we would have benefited more by digging a little deeper years ago.
Yeah. Um, w- with, I mean, the difficulty of like having success in the footwear industry. Now this is almost turning into like a Tyler and a like a Vance like startup journey as well. But the like, what would you say? My, just I'm interested. Like, what's made your like the work there that you guys have done as a team a success? Because there is no small feat to have. I mean, one footwear company, let alone multiple, right? So
Yeah. Um, I think it's mixed. You know, I think if you go out and look in the footwear industry right now, you can see brands that are doing really, really well with product that's not very good.
hmm,
In the reverse, I think you've seen a lot of brands that make really good product, but they weren't really able to create a sustaining business. So for us, honestly, our biggest value, or our biggest asset, is the relationships we have with all the big national retailers.
yeah,
KNS, because we were really early to the dropship business, we formed relationships with all these big national retailers as they were really learning about how a drop shipping company like ours could help build their business with minimal investment or effort on their side. So that's been kind of our guiding light, is just the fact that we have all these strong relationships with our retail partners. We have a world-class operations team in warehouse that they're the backbone of our business.
hmm,
And we know as we go into meetings with retailers that we can show them statistics of our shipping time frames and our late orders and things like that, that is second to none in the industry. So I think at the very minimum, we can go into a meeting and show what KNS does as a company. I don't mean to, like, it sounds like a sales pitch for my company, but
no. This is part of the story.
it,
This is the
it's been the backbone of our company, is our relationships we have, and how good we are at what we do, and that helps open doors into other aspects of business that maybe we weren't in the past. The last 2 years, we've really focused on getting a footing in the wholesale business, which we've done so far, and had some success there. And that has primarily come only because we have such great relationships with our retail partners. They know who we are, they know we're reliable, they trust our product, and it's given them an opportunity to say, well, maybe if we didn't know the brand, we wouldn't be as interested in buying their product and putting it in our stores. But because they've worked with KNS for so long, it's made those conversations a lot easier.
yeah. Um, that's cool. I mean, relationships are huge, and then obviously the ability to give great service, right?
Yeah.
Would I guess changing the light from KNS back to you, um, and I guess was when you, because you've been there for 11 years now, is that right?
Yep.
11 years. That's awesome. Um, and maybe footwear wasn't your initial passion. Is that correct? Or
Yeah.
yeah. Would you say um that it's become so, or
Oh yeah, definitely. I've always been I've always been kind of a sneakerhead.
okay.
I love basketball. I will play it or watch it as often as possible. So I just kind of I like sneakers anyways. So I've always kind of had that love. I never really I mean honestly the thought never crossed my mind to pursue that as a business or as a career. So
Yeah.
for me it's been a really easy transition to say, hey, I've always loved shoes. I the moment I started working in footwear, I was, it just made total sense to me.
Yeah.
But the thought never crossed my mind when I was in school to pursue, this type of a career.
Yeah, I mean, did you, outside of you guys starting to drop ship product and working in that space, did you know anyone that worked in like product development at all? I mean, outside of footwear or anything like that?
Nope, no one,
Yeah.
not a clue.
Same.
And
Yeah,
I
that was
just,
kind of like uh yeah, I didn't even know that was I never even thought about the fact that someone was creating the stuff around us, Is the
yeah.
um what would you say? So now you're leading the team, so you're over Vance and Taft. That's right.
Mhm.
Um, and as you're building out the team, say people looking at the industry, learning more about KNS, what what type of um, attributes do you guys look for in like people to join your team that are new to the industry? And maybe you could even segue that into like any like personal experience as to like what's given you success going through
Mhm.
at KNS, but maybe that's like a two-part
No, that's
double
good.
question.
So the interesting thing about this industry, you're really kind of mixing art and science together.
Yeah.
So for me, I thought I was going to be a finance guy in school, so that was definitely where my focus was. And I didn't even consider the fact that I had a creative side, honestly. So I spent years in school, and before that, more focusing on kind of the science or that part of my brain. And when I transitioned into this role, I realized I had kind of neglected the artistic side of my personal development.
Yeah.
I mean, I just never knew I would need that. I didn't expect to be in this type of career. So for us, I think it's really important when we look for talent for our team is trying to find someone who has a good healthy balance between not just understanding like what's trending right now in the industry, what colors are on trend. So it's important as a fashion company to understand and have a strong like opinion and understanding of industry trends, but we also want to match that with someone who can think, they can read a balance sheet, they can focus on data, they can read a sales report and make decisions based on that. So it's really kind of a two-pronged approach to really balancing the numbers with the kind of the artistic side of making a subjective guess or a subjective decision based on what they think they're seeing in the industry. So really, just I guess to make that a lot more succinct is just someone who is well-rounded and isn't just they don't just like design, but they want to look at the whole package and from more of a macro point of view.
Yeah. Something that I'm passionate about is like uh teaching teaching people, or I mean letting allowing others to share their story and to teach like that there is like creative jobs that you can get into and career paths to follow.
Yep.
You talked about how you had not like or hadn't um I guess considered that as a path, or um thinking about finance or other routes within business management. Was there um, was like art or creativity something that you were into when you were younger, or like in like high school, middle school, junior high time, or was that something uh, not as much?
I not really,
Yeah,
at least not in the traditional sense. So I I'm kind of a hands-on type of person. So like for me, and maybe a lot of other people, when you think of being creative or artistic, you think of like drawing or painting or something in
right.
kind of the fine arts. And me as like a kind of a hands-on person, I like to build things.
Yeah,
I've worked on classic cars my whole life.
cool.
I building furniture, things like that. So like I never really equated that to being creative, or like that, working in that type of environment didn't really occur to me as like a type of kind of creative outlet.
Yeah.
So I think I had those, kind of an inkling of that skill when I was younger and throughout my life, but I didn't really think of it that way.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there's also like there's a big difference between, and I'm sure you'd agree, but like there's a big difference between sketching a shoe on a notepad and saying, "Oh, I kind of like that pattern. Like that'd be cool." But there's so many other steps beyond that between, choosing a color palette, choosing materials, what kind of insole are you using, all these other things that go into that. So it's like there are a lot of people that could be really good at just sketching a cool, unique pattern for a sneaker or a running shoe or whatever. But there's so many other things that go beyond that to build out the actual product. So taking it from on a page or a screen into a usable product. So I think there's aspects that are just like visually creative, but also like functionally creative where that
Yeah,
development piece comes in. So I mean, I just think there's so many different aspects to developing good footwear that um, kind of touches on so many different areas of someone's experience or their education.
totally. Yeah. So you were well. No, I'm just gathering my thoughts here. With the good like stutter in the middle there, but I totally agree. I think the problem solving building aspect um to creativity for footwear is super key,
Yep.
especially um when you're on a smaller team and you're not in the siloed role of just being the sketch guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
um there's so much more to it. um was it when you like came into it and jumped into having to add that creativity into what you were doing? um what was I guess it sounds like you're out. I guess outside of work, are you still working on classic cars? Are you still doing a lot of building different things like
Oh yeah.
that?
Yep. Anytime I can.
So when it was like, all right, Tyler, we need you to build some shoes, you're like, okay, I'm jumping into it.
Yeah. Like
We know the
immediately
components
interested
is
in.
ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, there's been a lot of missteps along the way, being a little bit self-taught. But yeah, I was definitely kind of gung ho the second that opportunity came. It's like, all right, let's figure out how to do this and let's go.
Yeah. It seems to be like a weird parallel between footwear people and car people. Is that something you've noticed? Or is,
Um, I I could see it for sure. I don't know a lot of car people that are also footwear people.
that's a good
Um,
point. There's probably there's a space where the Venn diagram doesn't cross too, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and I should say, like this is definitely not applicable to the podcast, but my dad, my brothers, we've always worked on muscle cars. So when you
Yeah.
say car people, we go to a car show and it's full of 60 and 70-year-old guys in their hot rods, and there's no footwear people there. So,
Right.
maybe in the younger crowd, in a different type of car category, maybe it's there, but
Fair enough. Yeah. It's just it's in like the industrial design space. It seems like a lot of people that are like sketching shoes or sketching cars. I don't know. That's
yeah.
kind of like
No,
the
I get
crossover. But
it.
I do know what you mean. What I guess the people not crossing over in that Venn diagram. It's kind of funny. Um, just going through some of the questions that I've had here. I guess um, in in getting into footwear and diving deep into the footwear industry and leading multiple brands, what would you say? Uh, well, I guess you. I mean, you talked about it about people, um, the design side and also the analytical side of things. But um, where would you say now would tell someone to, I guess, get experience um, in the footwear space, or how to like set yourself apart as someone trying to be a part of footwear?
Yeah,
Does that question make sense?
yeah, yeah. You know, the most important thing, if I were starting today from scratch, trying to get into the industry, I mean, it's not really a secret, but just exposure and experience in you know, as many different roles or aspects of the company as possible. For me, I prefer kind of the small company feel. You know, I like being able to talk to my boss or some, you know, another division head or department head with very little kind of red tape. And I think that's a great way to really build your knowledge base of the industry is having opportunities or you know that are different in different aspects of the company. You know, and I think it's really important to, as soon as you can, kind of figure out where your interests lie and pursue those interests.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I think a lot of people could maybe be interested in design, but really, you know, at some point they realize, man, you know, sketching's cool, but I really just like being hands-on with the product. I want to build it. I want to play with materials. So, you know, maybe you're not a designer, you need to be a developer.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe you're just naturally drawn to, you know, the merchandising piece and really diving into the numbers. So I think it's important to get as much experience in the different areas of the footwear business to really figure out where your interests lie. And if you can't do that at your, you know, if you happen to get a job at one of the bigger companies, I think it'd be really important or really valuable to find a mentor that can help you understand different aspects of the business, someone that you could bounce ideas off of, you can ask a lot of questions and really try to get your bearings and what your ultimate goal is for your career. One of the company values we have here at KNS is stay curious, and I really believe in that. You know, I think that you have to be the one that dictates where your career is going and figuring out where the missing pieces are in your own experience. You know, there's not like a cut and dry outline to say, oh, I need to hit these 3 checkpoints before I get to this next stage in my career. You know, we're all responsible for driving our own career, and we need to be the ones that figure out, you know, where do I need to learn, where are the gaps in my experience, and pursuing ways to fill those gaps. And I think by really connecting with people in the industry, whether it's someone at your company or maybe someone that doesn't even work with you, someone that can just give you pointers, you know, really give you direction and tell you the things you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's really the best way to kind of round yourself out. And I think as you interview for jobs and you kind of try to, you know, sell yourself as an employee, having a better understanding of what you're good at and maybe what you're not so good at, I think really is a positive thing to tell to a potential employer. So I think just generally, you know, if you're interviewing for a job, knowing what an interviewer likes about your resume and maybe knowing what they're seeing that's missing is important, so you can address those concerns. And I think that, you know, that's really helpful as a you know, newer employee trying to get a foothold in the industry.
I love that. Where would you like? Where have you made the most connections yourself? Is that LinkedIn? Is it like trade shows? What's
Yeah, kind of all that. I have a lot of people I've met at trade shows that, we didn't even work with. I didn't even end up working with them, but I've stayed in contact with them. I've definitely reached out to people on LinkedIn, just kind of, I mean, it's almost a cold call to say, hey, it doesn't even need to be like I've got a 10 question survey I want to ask you. It could be just to be a quick touch base to say, hey, I like what you're doing. Just so you've got some contacts in the industry. I've had conversations with people that, I never worked with. I probably won't ever work with, but it's just been a good resource.
yeah,
And then, of course, the people you work with that have that life experience or that career experience, even as they've moved on from our company, I'd like to stay in contact with them just to see what they're doing and, know that, they're there as kind of a sounding board if you have issues or questions about anything.
yeah, that's awesome. I think those are all great routes to awesome connections. I could echo a similar experience for sure with the people I've worked with or different locations. Do you have people reaching out to you a lot as well for I guess asking for work questions or um, looking
Yep.
for footwear advice?
Not so much people that are like trying to learn about the industry, but you know, you get a lot of people, of course, that are, factories reach out to you all the time, or people that want to be an agent or things like that. But um, those people. I mean, I have a lot of factories that I don't even work with anymore, but I stay in touch with the owners.
Yeah,
Things that they're seeing from other brands that might be working with them. You can glean information from factories, from agents, from sales teams from other companies. So yeah, I mean, I do have people reach out to me all the time. Not as much people that are interested in learning about the industry.
yeah. Maybe you will after this
Yeah, I
podcast.
mean, which is
I think that
I
from
wish I had done that a lot more at the beginning stages of my career. Is just
yeah,
really making the leap and asking people questions.
totally. Um, I like to jump into a personal question and not like a deep personal, but just like a fun personal question in the podcast as well if it comes up. But talking about like your love and interest in building things, could you tell the listeners, um, like what's your most recent car project or even
Um,
just like general outside of work project that
yeah,
you
so um, I had kids about 4 years ago, so I haven't worked on a lot of cars since then.
yeah
I have a 1971 Plymouth Barracuda that I've restored. It's mostly done, so I tinker with that on occasion.
yeah
But about 3 years ago, my wife and I bought a new home, so that's kind of been my um, love and hate relationship with those projects at the new house. So landscaping, and I built a shed last summer. Just there, a lot of little projects here and there that occupy my weekends now.
totally
So yeah,
the I can't say my dad is really into cars too. That was I'm also like a big basketball fan, like you were saying at the start. So we'll have to. I've
yeah.
got some off the podcast basketball questions for you, but um, I was a little more into basketball than I was cars, but I loved the Jeep Cherokee like boxy shape.
Yep.
And so when I was in college, I bought a Jeep Cherokee, which I thought was for like a screaming deal. And it turns out it was because it was really bad.
Yep.
So I didn't have the same tinkering or car building abilities as you, so that ended up just being a money pit for me.
Money pit.
So
Yep.
now I'm a like a Toyota Camry guy, just to something nice and
It's
reliable.
a lot cheaper that way.
Yeah, but I became good friends with the car mechanic,
Yeah.
um, so I had to look for advice on things to get to not be visiting him
Oh,
so
I'm
often.
sure.
Um, well, with that, do you have? Sorry, we've blown through all the awesome questions. Um, do you have any, I guess, like closing advice or thoughts on? Let's say we could say it's like a younger version of Tyler, or um, people looking to be any. I guess any. You've given amazing advice throughout the whole thing, but any other closing thoughts on the footwear industry or getting into it or um, the future of KNS? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've got a few things. So there's been kind of one thing that has kind of been I don't want to say a guiding light by any means,
Yeah,
but something I wrote down on my phone and I look at it on occasion. But I don't even remember who said it, but I remember seeing a quote once a long time ago, and it's, it goes something like, "At every job, you should either be earning or learning. Both is good, but one's okay. But if it's neither, you should move on." So I think it's really important to, you know, kind of work with a purpose. If you're at a job that, maybe you're not making as much money as you want to, but you're really learning a skill that's going to help benefit you in the future, like that's awesome. Always make sure you're doing that. And then I think the final part of that is, and sometimes this doesn't go as quickly as I think everyone wants, but ultimately, when you figure out what you want to do with your career, you need to be making the steps to get there. And, I get asked a lot, I mean, by people all the time, friends and family, old coworkers, like, oh, you're still with KNS. Like, wow, it's been a long time. It's a little bit unusual to stick around in a company for a long time these days. And I think it's really important to figure out what your ultimate goal is and be very clear about that where you work with your supervisor or whoever, and make sure there are steps that you can take to get to where you want to go. If you have a very specific goal in mind or something you want to do with your career, and where you're working is not able to provide you kind of a roadmap on how to get there, then it's time to look elsewhere.
yeah,
So I just think it's really important to, as soon as possible, set the goal for what you want, make sure there's a clear pathway to get there, wherever you're working, and if that pathway is not there, you need to find it. And I think it's really important to have that goal and do what you need to do to get there. And along the kind of the journey along the way is where you're going to learn all the things you need to learn. So you're of course in charge of making sure your skill set and your education align with your goal. But keep moving and keep looking for that pathway to get what you want. And I think that's really ultimately the most important advice I'd give to anyone is figure out what you want, make sure there's a pathway to get there, and you'll be in good shape.
I love that. I think that's golden. Um, well, I had a lot of awesome learnings, fun stories, and I think amazing advice. This will You'll for sure get people reaching out, asking you more questions, and looking to connect. I'm sure that's kind of the trend I've heard from all the podcasters.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your time, Tyler. I've learned a lot myself, and from your experience here. I think it's super cool. I'm excited to see. I love, I guess, living in Utah, having lived in Portland, being part of the footwear scene there, and
Mm-hmm.
then seeing the growth and like different emerging brands here. I love to be I guess like a local like shoe cheerleader for
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see other Utah companies, gain some traction.
totally. So I'm excited to see what you're going to continue building, and be a vocal cheerleader for it.
Yeah.
Um, but with that, we'll close off the pod, and if you're open for a couple more minutes, still chat for a little bit.
Sure.
But
Yep.
super appreciate your time. Is there? I'll post this on LinkedIn. And I guess, are you open for people to reach out or ask you any questions
Sure.
after the
Yep.
fact?
I'm always willing to share what little knowledge I have.
Cool. Well, I think it's a little bit more than little, but awesome. Okay. Well, with that, we'll close the podcast. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.